For the 25th time this month, I sat alone at the dinner table, the soft clinking of silverware echoing through the empty house. The clock read 7:42 p.m. Carl had called just 5 minutes ago, his voice rushed and low, like always. Working late? Again, sweetheart. Don't wait up, he said. The same excuse. The same lie. Steam curled from the roasted chicken I'd spent over an hour basting. Creamed spinach, his favorite, sat untouched in the serving bowl. I reached for the second plate I'd set out, hesitated, then slid it back into the cabinet. No point pretending anymore. Outside, the autumn wind howled against the windows, but the silence inside was louder. It was a silence I'd grown used to. Comfortable, almost. 25 years of quiet dinners, of folding laundry for two, but living like one. 25 years of his disappearing acts masked as overtime, of text messages answered 3 hours late with a lazy, sorry, busy day. I wasn't stupid. Carl wasn't working late. He hadn't been for a long time. I rose from the table and carried my plate to the sink, rinsing it in warm water while staring blankly out the kitchen window. The street outside was calm, familiar, but suddenly it all felt foreign. The trees, the neighbor's porch light, even the clinking wind chime by the garage. It belonged to a life that no longer felt mine. As I reached to turn off the tap, my hand trembled slightly. Not from fear, from clarity. I dried my hands, walked back to the table, and looked at the single-place setting. My lips parted just enough to whisper, barely audible even to myself. You're not working late. I know. Then, without a word, I reached for my coat by the door, slipped it on, grabbed my keys, and walked out into the night. It started small, as betrayals always do. First, it was the scent. Carl had worn the same cologne for over a decade, a sharp, earthy musk I bought him every Christmas. But a few months ago, I noticed he came home smelling different. Softer. Something floral and expensive, the kind you'd find behind glass counters at boutiques I'd never stepped foot in. Then came the receipts. Folded into quarters, stuffed deep in his coat pocket. I only found them because I'd washed the jacket myself, again. One was from a fancy steakhouse downtown, another from a toy store. We didn't have small kids. Our son was grown, moved, out years ago. So who was the toy for? The phone was next. He used to leave it face up on the coffee table, but now I saw it glued to his side. He charged it in his study, never let it out of sight. If it rang, he'd step outside to answer. If I got too close, he'd lock the screen fast. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe he was just stressed from work. Maybe I was being paranoid. But in my gut, I knew. Still, I said nothing. Until one Tuesday afternoon, I stopped by his office unannounced, a warm lunch in a tote bag, something I hadn't done in years. The receptionist blinked at me, confused. Carl? Oh, he hasn't been in all week. Took some personal days, she said casually. I froze. Are you sure? I asked, my voice thin. She nodded with a smile. Positive. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't confront him. I just sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor for a long, long time. The next day, I made a quiet call to my old friend Janet. Retired, discreet, loyal. The kind of woman who noticed everything and said little. I didn't have to explain much. Just gave her his name, a car description, and one simple request. I need to know where he goes when he says he's working late. Janet delivered within days, but in the end, it wasn't her photos or quiet observations that confirmed my worst fears. It was something far more brutal and far more accidental. It was the night of my niece's birthday. I'd baked cupcakes that morning and dropped them off at the venue, a kids' activity center just outside town. I'd planned to stay home, curl up with a book, but midway through the evening, my sister called, laughing breathlessly. Hey, Lynn, we forgot the gift bags in your car. You mind swinging by for a minute? I agreed. I threw on a coat and headed out, gift bags in tow. I didn't even take off my driving gloves when I stepped inside. The place was alive with music and children's squeals. Balloons floated along the ceiling. A clown twisted balloon animals in the corner. I scanned the room for my sister when my eyes caught something that made my stomach drop. Carl. He stood near the cake table, slightly turned away, wearing the same brown blazer he'd left the house in that morning. In his arms, a little girl, maybe 5 or 6, was laughing, her hands clutching his neck like she belonged there, like she knew him, and then came the word that shattered everything. "Daddy!" The girl beamed up at him. Carl smiled, kissed the top of her head, and said, "Happy birthday, sweetheart." I stood frozen by the door, gift bags dangling from my hand, forgotten. I couldn't move, couldn't blink, couldn't breathe. Because in that one instant, every suspicion I'd buried, every excuse I'd forced myself to believe, came undone. Carl never saw me, not once. I stood there for nearly a full minute, watching him laugh, crouch down, help the little girl blow out her candles. I even heard him say, "Daddy loves you so much." My chest clenched, but not from heartbreak. From rage, cold, still rage. I turned and walked out. The drive home was silent. I didn't play the radio, I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just stared at the road, white-knuckling the wheel, blinking too slowly, thinking too clearly. That night, Carl came home just before midnight, whistling as he kicked off his shoes. "Rough day," he mumbled, heading straight to the shower. I was curled on the couch with a book I wasn't reading. I looked up and smiled. "Dinner's in the oven," I said sweetly. "Still warm." He didn't suspect a thing. Over the next few weeks, I became a woman on a mission. I never asked questions. I never accused. I just watched. First, I noted the phone numbers he dialed when he thought I wasn't looking. Then I traced one through a service Janet recommended. It belonged to a woman named Cheryl Westbrook. 42, worked at a community theater, divorced, no criminal record. Social media set to private, except one photo, a picture from 6 years ago. A newborn girl swaddled, in pink, captioned, "Welcome my miracle." Born March 8th. I stared at that date for a long time. That was the same month Carl had disappeared for 4 days, claiming a conference in Dallas. I remembered because I'd gotten the flu and nursed myself alone with a fever of 102. I dug deeper. Cheryl lived in a modest home in a suburban cul-de-sac 20 minutes from our house. Not far enough to be careful. Just far enough to be lazy. I drove by. Twice. I parked under a tree across the street, sunglasses on, engine off. Watched Carl pull into her driveway with a bouquet of flowers and a backpack. The little girl ran out, squealing, "Daddy!" again. He scooped her up, kissed Cheryl on the cheek. I snapped a photo from my phone, steady hands. Dry eyes. Back home, I opened a new file on my laptop. Truth.pdf. Inside, I began collecting everything. Bank statements showed monthly cash withdrawals, same day, same amount, for over 6 years. Real estate records revealed Carl had co-signed on a second mortgage. Not in his name, of course, but the trail was there. I even discovered Cheryl's car insurance listed him as an emergency contact. It was all there. Every lie, every omission, every quiet theft of my life. And still, I said nothing. I kissed him goodnight, packed his lunch, listened to his stories about long meetings and last-minute deadlines, and nodded, eyes wide with practiced wonder. I was the perfect wife. I wanted him to believe it, wanted him to think he had me exactly where he wanted me, naive, dutiful, loyal, because when I brought the truth to light, I wouldn't just tell the story, I would broadcast it, and he wouldn't even see it coming. The invitations went out a month in advance, handwritten, formal, with embossed paper and gold trim. I addressed each one myself. I made it sound like a warm celebration, a gratitude gathering for friends and family, to honor love, loyalty, and legacy. Carl thought it was his idea. "You always throw the best parties," he said, sliding a hand around my waist. "We should do one. Big, for the whole family." I smiled. "Already working on it." We rented the event hall at the Glen Ridge Country Club, tasteful, upscale, neutral. The place where his brother had hosted his retirement bash, where our son celebrated his engagement. Polished floors, chandeliers, piano music playing softly in the background. I thought it was fitting. Let the truth crack the marble. The day of the event, guests arrived around 5 p.m., all in high spirits. Carl greeted everyone like a politician. Wide grins, hearty hugs, a drink always in hand. "My wife," he said, pulling me close more than once. The quiet force behind everything good in my life. I played along, smiling, kissing cheeks, making small talk while the slideshow ran on a loop across the big screen near the stage. Childhood photos, wedding pictures, vacations, holidays, the illusion of a happy marriage I'd perfectly curated. By 6:30, the hall was full. Carl's sister complimented the catering. Our daughter toasted her wonderful parents. Laughter bounced off the walls. And then Carl stood. He raised his glass. "To my wife," he said loudly, drawing the room into silence. "For putting up with me all these years. For being the most loyal, patient, generous woman I've ever known. Linda, my love, this is for you." Applause. I nodded graciously and turned to the AV technician in the back. "Next reel," I said. The applause faded as the screen flickered. Another family photo came up, a Christmas shot from 2012, then a video, blurry at first, then clearer. Carl, standing in a party room. A little girl in a pink dress runs into his arms, screaming, "Daddy!" as he lifts her with practiced ease. The room in the video is colorful, filled with balloons. A cake in the background reads, "Happy 6th birthday melody." People shifted in their seats. The audio clicked on. Carl's voice filled the room, soft, affectionate. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Daddy loves you." Gasps broke out. Carl froze beside me, his wine glass hovering mid-air. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. Another image appeared. A still photo. Carl kissing a woman's cheek. Cheryl. Another. Carl loading a car with birthday presents. Another. Carl signing a document. Zoom in on the notary seal. Co-signature for Cheryl Westbrook. Property purchase, dated 3 years ago. The murmurs grew, louder, thick, and electric. Then came the final blow. A voice recording. It was Cheryl, calm, unbothered, almost bored. "He always says he's working late. You'd think she'd have figured it out by now. I mean, we've been together over a decade. And Melody? He named her after his favorite song. That's not something a fling does. That's a man with 2 families. The screen went black. Silence. Then an explosion. Carl spun to me, face red, jaw tight. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I tilted my head. "Oh, just a little tribute, like you said, for loyalty." Carl let out a laugh. Ugly. Forced. "This is crazy. She's lying. All of it. Doctored. That video could be anything. You don't even know what you saw." I turned to him calmly. "You're right. I didn't know. Not at first, but now, I know everything." Carl turned toward the guests, throwing his hands up. "She's overreacting. I've been under pressure. It meant nothing. It's not what it looks like." "Then what is it, Carl?" Our son's voice cut through the noise. His face was pale. His wife stared at him in horror. "You had a whole other kid?" Carl stumbled, reaching for his glass again, but his hands were shaking now. I stepped forward. "I don't need to scream. I don't need to beg. You spent years creating a performance, Carl. I just wanted to give you the final act." Someone, near the front, whispered, "This can't be real." I looked around the room. You all thought I was just the quiet one, the good wife, the invisible one. But invisible doesn't mean blind, and silent doesn't mean stupid. Carl moved toward me, his voice lowered. "You want to ruin me? In front of my family?" I smiled. "Carl," I said softly, "you did that yourself." Then I walked off the stage. The room erupted behind me. Accusations, shouting, chairs scraping against tile. Someone knocked over a wine glass, but I kept walking. Heels steady, spine straight, because I hadn't just exposed a man. I'd buried a lie, and finally, I was free. The aftermath wasn't quiet. Carl's mother was the first to speak once the room emptied out. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut through bone. "You've brought shame to this family," she hissed, staring him down like she didn't recognize him. 30 years I gave you? 30? And this is what you were doing behind my back? Carl tried to explain, but his father raised a hand. Enough, he said firmly. You don't come back to our house. Not until you fix this mess, if it even can be fixed. For the first time in decades, I saw Carl disowned. Not by a stranger, not by a jury, but by the people whose approval he always chased. His own parents turned their backs and walked out without a glance behind them, but it didn't end there. 2 days later, Cheryl showed up at our doorstep. I wasn't home, Carl answered in sweatpants and defeat. You told me she didn't exist anymore, I heard her spit later, through a mutual friend's recounting. That your marriage was just a formality, that you were only staying for appearances. So who the hell was she last weekend, standing on that stage with the receipts? Carl stood stunned, mouth open. I thought I was the secret, she continued, her voice trembling. Turns out I was just one of the secrets. You think I want my daughter growing up in the shadow of your shame? Before he could answer, she slapped a manila envelope against his chest and walked away. Inside were papers, notice of custody arrangement, no negotiation. By the time Carl turned to look back at the life he thought he controlled, it had already started to vanish. That same night, I stepped into the house for the final time. I didn't say a word. Just wheeled my suitcase down the hallway, grabbed the last folder from the desk drawer, and paused in the doorway of the kitchen, where I'd once spent hours making dinner for a man who never came home on time. He stood in the living room, hunched and disheveled. You're not going to talk to me? He called out. After everything? I turned to face him. You're right, I said. After everything, I shouldn't waste a single more word. The next week, the court saw the folder, bank statements, property ties, cash withdrawals, photographic evidence, logins, voicemails, copies of every lie he ever signed. The judge barely needed 20 minutes. I walked out with full ownership of the house, half of Carl's remaining assets, and a divorce decree stamped in thick black ink. I didn't cry in court. I didn't smile either. I just signed my name, lifted my chin, and walked out the front doors like a woman unchained. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not my children, not my neighbors, not even Janet. I packed only what I needed, transferred the settlement money into a private account, and booked a one-way train ticket to a quiet beach town I'd once seen in a travel brochure, back when I still dreamed in secret. The house I rented was small, whitewashed, with chipped shutters and a wraparound porch that caught the ocean wind just right. Mornings were filled with gulls and salt. Evenings with silence, not the kind that hurt, but the kind that healed. A week after I arrived, I passed a sign. Ceramics Workshop, Beginner's Welcome. I walked in on impulse. By the second class, my hands found rhythm in the clay. There was something honest about shaping something from nothing, something grounding. The instructor, a soft-spoken woman named Elise, watched me work in near silence, then offered me a private corner to sculpt alone. I spent hours there. One afternoon, Elise recorded a time-lapse of me finishing a delicate porcelain bowl shaped like a wave. She posted it online with a caption, Healing in Motion. The clip went viral in 3 days. Messages poured in, comments, emails. Someone from a women's retreat in Oregon reached out and asked if I'd consider teaching a workshop, just one weekend, just to share how I found myself again through my hands. I said yes. A month later, a letter arrived. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. Carl. The envelope was creased, the ink shaky. Inside, a brief apology, a few desperate lines, a vague request to talk. He was broke now, alone. He missed me. I folded the letter once, placed it on my desk, and wrote a single reply on thick cardstock. This is the life I was always meant to live, without you. I sealed it, stamped it, and sent it off without looking back. The gallery wasn't large, just 2 rooms, one for display, the other for creation. But it sat right on the edge of the coastline, where the scent of sea salt drifted through the open windows, and the sun spilled golden light across the shelves of handcrafted bowls, plates, and vases. Above the door hung a simple wooden sign, hand-carved and painted in blue. Linda Pierce Studio, my name, not his. Not anyone else's. Mine alone. I never marketed it aggressively, yet the studio stayed busy, not because of the ceramics, though those were beautiful, but because of the classes. Every Wednesday evening, a group of women, divorced, widowed, heartbroken, forgotten, came together around a long table, sleeves rolled up, hands deep in clay. They talked, they cried, sometimes they laughed, but always they created. I didn't teach with techniques or theory. I taught with silence and space, and somehow, that was exactly what they needed. One evening, after everyone had gone, I turned off the lights, locked the front door, and stepped barefoot onto the sand. The waves whispered softly in the dark. Walked until my feet met the tide, looked out at the endless ocean and smiled, not bitterly, not sadly, but truly, because for the first time in my life, I was whole. And finally, seen.